Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, September 26th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Maryland game is in 11 days. The game against Michigan in 60 days. We're not going to talk about either of those games, let's be honest. We got to talk a little bit more about that Ohio State 17, Notre Dame 14 game that you saw on Saturday night in South Bend. Tony Gerdeman and I did 2+ hours of post-game coverage. There was another hour before that. But with everything that happened, there was so much to talk about that there was a bunch of stuff that just kind of fell through the cracks. And you're going to hear us talk about 5 different storylines here that kind of fell through the cracks to one degree or another. And there's some really big stuff here. So we wanted to kind of circle back, do a little bit of due diligence and housekeeping here to make sure we're honoring every one of these storylines that really should be talked about. Because, again, with the Ryan Day post-game press conference, the dramatic end to the game, there was a lot that you could forget about from the first 59 minutes and 30 seconds or so of that game. So we're going to start talking about that stuff, and we're going to do that with our buddy Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. He was there covering the game, asked Ryan Day a question about the first guy we're going to be talking about. In fact, after that game, Tony, we got to talk about Chip Trayanum, because yes, he's the guy who apparently is keeping Ryan Day loose during pregame. He is also the guy who scored the winning touchdown. But I think we really need to kind of go back even further, back to Chip Trayanum in high school and what happened to him after high school. And he's sort of finally, there was a long and winding road that led him to that moment in the just barely across the goal line in Notre Dame Stadium.
Yeah, Chip Trayanum, just a kid from Akron, and wanted to be a running back in college. Ohio State kind of liked him more as a linebacker, so he took his talents to Arizona State, where he played quite a bit the first 2 years there, and then decided, it's probably time to come back home, and Ohio State brought him in as a linebacker. Last year, there was a bunch of talk about him, how athletic he was, during camp last year, and the speed and the athleticism and just the willingness to do whatever. And then late in the season, they needed him at running back, and he was there, and he was the guy against Michigan. And then coming into this season, Tom, we were, the third or fourth running back in the mix, right? Because you've got Travion Henderson, you've got Mayan Williams, you've got Dallin Hayden, you've got all of these guys that played last year. And then he was just an extra. Like when you buy furniture and there are extra pieces that come with, 2 extra bolts and some extra nuts and that sort of thing. He was like an extra, but he has been instrumental in what Ohio State has done this year. And it's, Travion Henderson is the star running back, but when the team needed that 1 yard, they went to a guy who came to Ohio State to play linebacker.
Yeah, and a guy who Ohio State, 4 years ago, didn't think was an Ohio State running back necessarily, or at least that wasn't his best option. So yeah, that is, those are always such interesting stories to me, because you come out of high school and a lot of times the program knows best. And Lorenzo Styles Jr. coming out of high school wanted to play receiver. Ohio State said, you're maybe more of a corner. And he went to Notre Dame, played wide receiver for a couple of years, now back at Ohio State and playing corner. So, you will have times where it ends up with, the school was right maybe coming out of the gate. Chip Trayanum may have been onto something there when he thought maybe I can play running back at Ohio State. Turns out, he can. Someone else who probably had a pretty good idea what he was coming out of high school and took a little bit of a long and winding path to get there is Xavier Johnson. He came out of the Cincinnati area, had Power 5 offers. He had an offer from Iowa State, for example, to be a scholarship football player, passed up that to come be a walk-on for Urban Meyer at Ohio State. It was not a direct and easy route from there to what happened on Saturday night or what happened last year against Notre Dame. But, Xavier Johnson, to go from walk-on to all of the accolades he's received and then some of the moments he's had, especially against Notre Dame in the last couple of years, that is quite a story.
Yeah, and he may be the best story of anybody on this Ohio State football team to show up to Ohio State walk on as basically an athlete. And he started out as a corner, played running back, played receiver, back to running back to receiver, and has done whatever, and throw kickoff return in there, throw kick coverage in there, has done whatever the team has asked him to do. And, going into last year, looking like he was going to have a role in the passing game as a receiver. And I remember talking to running backs coach Tony Alford saying, what would happen if you went to Xavier Johnson, knowing that he's going to have a role in the receiver rotation, and you said, Xavier, we need you in the running back room in case somebody gets hurt or because somebody has gotten hurt. We just need you for depth. And he said that Xavier would say, when do you need me? What can I do? Let's meet after practice. I'll come to your house. We'll talk it over. Show me the playbook, things like that in terms of assignments. And then lo and behold, 2 months later, that's exactly what happened. And he stepped in, and we saw him against Michigan. We saw him against Georgia, like just being involved in any way he can. And that has carried into this season now, where they can put him wherever they want and they'll get something out of him. So it's a fantastic story, culminated by wearing the Block O jersey this year, being given that honor, and just one of the nicest guys that we've ever dealt with covering the Ohio State beat in the time that we've all done it. And from 2018 when he arrived until now, like it's pretty remarkable that he's been able to do so much. And not that he's done a lot, but he's been involved in a lot of things, and is also now an Ohio State captain as well.
Yeah, the Block O captain, and he's not going to end up in the top 10 of career rushing yards or receiving yards or anything like that in Ohio State history, but he's a smarter version of Forrest Gump, where boy, he just keeps popping up in these big situations where crucial second half touchdown against Notre Dame in 2021, crucial touchdown against Georgia in the Peach Bowl last year, huge play that if Ohio State had scored on their penultimate drive against Notre Dame, boy, that's another one that goes down in history. As it was, it is just ends up sort of being a footnote. But yeah, he's had some crucial moments and earned every single one of those accolades that he's gotten. Next up, a guy who came to Ohio State in the more traditional route, highly ranked linebacker out of Jersey City, New Jersey, Cody Simon. He has been, he is stuck behind a couple very other talented linebackers, Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberger in the depth chart. But then he ended up making one of the crucial plays in Saturday's game. But his mistake was making it way too early in the game. And by the time the game ended, everyone had forgotten about the fact that Cody Simon stopped Sam Hartman on 4th and 1 at the OSU 18 on the very first drive of the game for Notre Dame. Irish had driven 14 plays, 71 yards, taken 8 minutes off the clock. They're in the red zone. And then Cody Simon comes up and sticks Sam Hartman just short of the sticks. It was initially ruled a first down, got overturned on replay. That's one of those plays, Tony, that we did, I think, 2 hours of postgame, and I don't know if we actually mentioned that play because there was so much other stuff that happened. But man, oh man, if Notre Dame picks up a first down and scores a touchdown or even kicks a field goal there, that changes the complexion of that game completely.
Yeah, and it was a remarkable play by Simon, who was basically being taken down the field by a fullback and then had to fight off that block to come and pick up Sam Hartman before he could actually cross the line. And based on the way Hartman was holding the ball, I was actually a little surprised they went and reviewed it, and then even more surprised that they decided to overturn it. Not that they were wrong in doing that. It's one of those close calls that usually they just give the benefit to the runner, but to go back and look at it, and I think they had enough angles that you could see that Cody Simon got there. And yeah, he's another good story. He played quite a bit in this game, was oddly substituting with, I think, Davison Igbinosun at times, the cornerback, when Notre Dame would come out with just one wide receiver. They'd take a corner off the field, throw Simon out there. And, this is another guy who in 2021 started 9 games at linebacker for Ohio State, started most of the season for them, and then gave way in the middle to Tommy Eichenberger, and that has worked out well. And, when Simon has been healthy, he's been pretty good. And this is another guy that provides depth and provides that third linebacker for games like this when they're going up against more of a power attack. But yeah, that play was impressive. Just going back and rewatching it to refresh, like, what play are you even talking about, Tom? There was only maybe, like 60 plays on defense or whatever. And that happened so far in the past that you forget just how big it was, because that drive was taking forever. who knows how much longer that drive would have taken if Notre Dame picks up that first down.
Yeah, and for a defense that was pretty gassed by the end of the game, not having those extra, 5 plays or whatever it would have been, plus the points, plus the time it would have kept Ohio State's offense off the field. Yeah, that ended up being a huge play that got just completely forgotten by the time the game was over. Something else, another guy who is sort of getting his accolades now. He was just named the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week, but Lathan Ransom, the safety, 7 tackles, 6 assists, 13 tackles total, plus a quarterback hurry. He's another guy who, when you play safety, it is very easy to have the one bad moment, and then that's all anyone remembers for you. For 9 months, when you heard Lathan Ransom's name, everyone went, oh, yeah, the guy who slipped and fell down during the Georgia game, and they scored a long touchdown. Lathan Ransom has given you something else to think about when you hear his name now. That was a fantastic performance from him. And, we talked a little bit after the game about the fact that when your safeties are leading you in tackles, that's not always a great thing. That's not always a great sign when your safeties are some of your leading tacklers. But man, oh man, did Lathan Ransom have a night.
And I think one of the reasons why it was maybe okay in this one is because they were tackling closer to the line of scrimmage, and Notre Dame still rushed for 170 some yards in that one. And it's not great, but they didn't, it wasn't necessarily any instances where, you're 30 yards downfield, you're chasing somebody. And he was very effective, Lathan Ransom. And that one play against Georgia, can you fault somebody for getting beaten deep when you're going up against a 10-1 100-meter guy and you slip a little bit? You don't need to slip to lose a race to that guy, but that's what happened. And right now Lathan Ransom is playing very, very well. And it may be a little bit quiet for some people, and maybe I don't want to mention Jordan Fuller's name in terms of the kind of things that are happening for him right now, but he's just been very, very solid and very, very physical. There are times when he's come up all throughout the season, including against Notre Dame, and hitting like a linebacker, and players are staying hit against, talented players. And it's good to see. And this is a guy who's been around since 2020 as a true freshman playing. Ryan Day loved him then. And you don't hear anybody say anything bad about him. And that's another indicator that he's a guy that does whatever is asked, will do whatever is asked, has played all over in the secondary, all 3 safety spots for the Buckeyes, and maybe out of position at times, playing in the slot and early in his career, but seems to have found a home now at strong safety.
Yeah, it's always nice when you can say something nice about a position where they typically just get talked about as the guy who did something wrong, rightly or wrongly. Sometimes it's just, there's the guy who's chasing on TV. You see them chasing the receiver on TV, and it's like, he must have been the one who got beat. And it's like, not always. Nice to be able to say something nice. It's like long snappers. No one ever says anything about long snappers unless that something bad happens. So nice to be able to say something nice about a guy who plays a position where a lot of times people point rightly or wrongly at that position and say, your fault. Like, sometimes, not always. Last up, I wanted to talk about someone from Notre Dame. Now, this is a name that will be very familiar to Ohio State fans, but Javontae Jean-Baptiste, he was a defensive end for Ohio State starting in 2018. He spent forever, it felt like, trying to get up to weight. He came in very, very undersized. I remember talking to him about, having to eat 8,000 calories or something like that, trying to get his weight up and how difficult it was for him to get up to weight. And he was just sort of always a role player for Ohio State. And you saw him, he would get starts when they went back to his home state of Rutgers. And that was kind of it. And then he'd be a rotational player. But that was more or less his role at Ohio State. He has gone to Notre Dame, and he has turned himself into an impact defensive end for the Irish. 8 tackles on Saturday night, 1 quarterback hurry. That was one of those, you look at those numbers, you look at his play, and it's like, you know what? Good for him. That is something that deserves some accolades as well.
Yeah, his name was being mentioned constantly on the public address, just involved. And I'm pretty sure he tipped the first pass of the last drive to Travion Henderson. That's why it was so off. And that was an impressive performance by him. I think personally, maybe I was some would say maybe a little dismissive of the impact that he would have coming into this game, but he proved me wrong. And, he was certainly playing to prove a lot of people wrong on the Ohio State sideline. But after the game, watching the portions of the television broadcast over, saw Javontae Jean-Baptiste with, I believe, running backs coach Tony Alford afterwards, big hug there. And then Ryan Day, after his post-game television interview, turned around and there's Javontae Jean-Baptiste and, gave him a hug as well. So some guys happy to see him on what was a really good game for him, but also quite obviously a tough loss.
Yeah, and it's nice to see the transfer portal has been pretty good to Ohio State over the years, with a quarterback from Georgia, with an offensive lineman from Rutgers. I mean, they have pulled some real running back from Arizona State, as we talked about earlier in the show. They have pulled a few real pieces of gold out of the transfer portal. And it is nice to see when guys who are at Ohio State. There was a quarterback who went down to LSU a few years ago who worked out pretty well. A wide receiver who went to Alabama. And now a defensive end going to Notre Dame. It's nice to see those guys get a chance to succeed wherever it ends up being. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm sure everyone's not quite ready to let that Notre Dame game go. Going to guess we'll probably be talking about it a little more this week. Good news, we have a little extra time to look back at that because there is no game coming up on Saturday. So I have a little more time to go look back at that. I'm sure we'll have Ross Fulton on later in the week to talk about some of it. But make sure you also are checking out all of our other podcasts. Tony and I do the Buckeye Weekly podcast. The Michigan Monday episode going to be delayed until Tuesday. I know you can't wait to hear about that thrilling Rutgers game. May end up talking a little bit of Penn State too, because there's only so much you can talk about Michigan Rutgers. We'll be talking about that on Tuesday. We'll have plenty of coverage. We'll do our rewatch episode of the game. I'm so interested to rewatch this game because I still feel like we did 2 shows now talking about that game, and there's still a bunch of stuff that feel like I'm going to watch the game and go, oh yeah, that happened, and get a different angle on things. So we'll have that all coming up this week on the Buckeye Weekly podcast feed. And of course, you can also find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Have plenty of stuff going on, plenty of stuff to talk about this week on the Huddle board, which is members only. So I want to consider signing up. Looks like it might be a pretty good season in Columbus. Who knew? Who could have seen this coming? Might be a great time to become a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.